My husband Brian and I want to share a really interesting part of a journey that we've been on. We've had a lot of amazing experiences, having been able to travel to lots of countries. But this particular story, in a way, it almost found us rather than we finding it. The whole time we were being carried along in a story that had already started, and we just got to enjoy being a part of it for a season.
When I saw Lilius's work, the gift of seeing the glory of God in nature and flowers, it resonated with me. There's something very special about touching a book that you know somebody you really care about touched.
It all started when I was on Amazon and I had purchased some books about Amy Carmichael, who was a missionary in India. And Amazon will say, if you like this, maybe you'll like this. So it introduced me to a book called A Passion for the Impossible and another book called A Blossom in the Desert. Both of these books were about a woman by the name of Lilius Trotter. I was looking at A Blossom in the Desert, and it is a story about Lilius Trotter, and it shows a lot of her art and a lot of her quotes. And the very first quote in the front of the book that really drew me in was,
"Take the very hardest thing in your life, the place of difficulty, outward or inward, and expect God to triumph gloriously in that very spot. Just there, He can bring
your soul into blossom. After reading that and seeing the beautiful art in this book and more of her quotes, we really wanted to meet Miriam Rockness, the one who had put this book together.
I met two women, the Barber sisters, in 1986, and they first introduced me to Lilius Trotter, an obscure, unknown Victorian-era artist. Other than being kind of an interesting story, I never thought about Lilius again. And then, several months later, a package arrives in the mail. What was in that package? It was one of those moments that was going to change my life. Looking at this little white book with gold lettering, Lilius Trotter of Algiers, and just the opening sentence.
There lies before us a beautiful possible life, one with a passion for giving that shall be poured forth to God, but spent out for man.
I don't think anything in my greatest imagination would have ever envisioned the partnership with Brian and Sally.
To me, it was the double punch of not only the art, but it was her words. It's the way she would describe God's glory within the mundane and the simple things. It's really that total package.
It is.
And then you go, wow, and you don't just say, wow, Lilius, but you say, wow, what a God.
Yes.
Through the passion that Miriam had, and through all the work and just the years she had spent in trying to get Lilius's story out by both writing a biography and also this beautiful picture book with Lilius's art. As we think about Lilius's life, the thing that so epitomizes her life was the song called Turn Your Eyes Upon Jesus, written by Helen Lemmel, and she was inspired by Lilius's booklet, Focused. When Lilius was out in a woods one day, there was a ray of light coming through the trees that just so reflected on a small little half-wilted dandelion. She just said this little dandelion was full-faced to the sun and reflected the light in such a beautiful way. Helen Lemmel had become quite a well-known singer and quite a songwriter. She sang at a lot of large conventions and evangelistic meetings, so much so that she was encouraged to actually go study abroad in Germany, I believe, to develop her voice even more. So she was a very talented woman, and she met and married her husband there in Europe. And as she got older, She developed a disease that eventually she lost her eyesight. She was a very prolific songwriter. I think she wrote 400 or 500 hymns. During the process of losing her sight, she also lost her husband as he couldn't deal with what she was going through. So she had a lot of sadness in her life, but the interesting thing that a song titled "Turn Your Eyes Upon Jesus" would be written by a blind woman. Even though she was physically blind, her spiritual eyesight was great. So these two women, even though they never met, their writings came together to form this song. And when Lilias heard about the song that Helen had written, she added it to her focus booklet. One very amazing woman that is also part of this story is a woman that also went to Algeria as a missionary in the 1950s.
A long time ago, in a very different world from today's world, and in very different conditions, both in Algeria and in the rest of the world.
But she worked under the same mission organization that Lilias had founded.
Yes, we met some people, some Algerians who remembered her, not very many, because she'd already been dead some time. She died in 1928 and we arrived in 1956. And these people were sort of women in their early middle age who remembered her when they were girls. But they remembered her with much affection, her love, her welcome to everybody. Mostly talking, I think, and also writing. She wrote a lot of things, you know, little leaflets and things, explaining Bible stories. And she also, of course, was a great artist, and so illustrated these with beautiful pictures of Algerian life. She understood a good bit, I think, about Arab culture and the way that stories are told and local colour, and she was good at speaking out the local Arabic too. So she was a very good communicator, I'm sure. I mean, she certainly had an insight into the way people thought and how to explain what she wanted to convey in the way that people thought and would understand. Well, when my husband had to leave, there was a whole room full of these writings and journals and things left by Mistrata. I thought, well, what can I do with them? You know, I couldn't throw them away. So the only thing really to do was to try to keep a specimen of all the different things that there were there. But, you know, there were one or two things that happened that seemed to make it clear that it was right that I should. First of all, I realized the extent of the archives that were there, and also the Algerian Christians. Other people had been expelled at the same time. The meeting room had been closed down. It was a whole lot all happening at once. You know, if I could stay, it seemed better, really. And someone sent me a text as well from someone who knew nothing about what was happening. And somebody I didn't really know that well, really, in a church in this country where my father was then attending. And they sent me the text, God says to Solomon, I will not leave you until you have accomplished everything that you have to do for the house of God. And I felt, well, you know, that lady didn't know what was happening, and yet God had given her that verse. And I thought, well, it seemed, even though other people were not always agreed, including my own father, who wasn't agreed, it seemed to me that God was saying, stay and finish. We lived for the first 20 years, maybe, in the house that Mistrata had lived in. It was like all Turkish houses. It had lots of very beautiful tiles inside. The prayer court had a marble floor. Also, there was a very interesting little room, which was always known as Mistrata's prayer room. And apparently they didn't discover it first of all when they moved into the house, but then they found this little room which had been part of the Turkish baths, And it was half underneath the back of the prayer court, and you went down steps to it, and it was completely enclosed. You couldn't see any outlet. This was a little circular room, not very big, and round the top part of the ceiling, which was the bottom part of the dome, there was a text written, which I think Mistrata had written, and because this was her prayer room where she used to come. And it was, "We do not yet see everything put under him, but we see Jesus." And, you know, I thought that was an amazing text, really, and a statement of faith. But just to see that text written round it was a big inspiration.
Lilius's life inspired the song that has been passed down through generations, the song "Turn Your Eyes Upon Jesus."